Neil Frost, CEO of Bob's Business, who's going to talk through their last 20 years of security awareness. So round of applause, please, for Neil.
Excellent, thanks everybody. So what do you want to know about me? I think you can mainly see from the brochures my background, 20 years in government, working with enforcement and then into cybersecurity. But really, the main thing you need to know about me is effectively, I kind of work with organisations to really empower people to adopt cyber habits that improve their personal safety, and ultimately that really becomes a part of culture for organisations. But I kind of want to not sit here and talk about the sweetness and light of everything. 20 years in government, I've got a confession, and today over at the Bob's Business stand where I'll be for the next 3 days, we're asking for people to confess some of their cybersecurity sins or mistakes they've made. But the reality is that as part of government, when I first started, I was the guy who kind of created loads of dashboards that made people feel safe while they were actually at risk of really risky behaviours. Or I helped design cybersecurity awareness programs that were really like PowerPoint decks where we were kind of teaching people to pass quizzes but not actually understand the security risk around human-related risk. And really there's that massive focus, and most organisations we speak to who first start anything around human-related risk, they kind of start from a compliance-based stance. And that we kind of told ourselves that compliance was culture, but really it isn't. So I kind of want to talk about what's going to happen when we stop lying to ourselves about really what awareness and training and phishing simulations should really look like. I do want to kind of mention box ticking. And what we do as a business is really focus on positivity. So those that are box tickers, I want to actually say congratulations to you, because I see on social media a lot of the industry will criticise people that tick boxes when it comes to particularly cyber awareness. But the first thing is you've started. There's lots of organisations that don't do anything. So those box tickers, you've actually in a place where you're actually starting to recognise that there's a need for policies or processes or training. You've recognised the threat actually exists. So if you are a box ticker, well done for starting. That's not the worst place to be starting from. It's effectively really a sign of maturity. A lot of these frameworks are really in place that are putting in place a roadmap for success. You're accepting some form of accountability by ticking that box. You recognise the risk. It's certainly not the foundation, and I want to talk about some of the things we should be doing beyond box ticking. But compliance does give you a good start point. But ultimately, that point of compliance that I thought may have been culture years ago, what have I learned? Well, really, anyone who focuses on awareness and staff training, compliance is really just measuring activity. You're not actually measuring the behaviour of your organisation. And what I kind of did was start to pivot about, okay, what goes beyond completion rates? A lot of organisations are still focused on training. How many people have completed a module or done their training? And really, the focus needs to be starting to look at what your vulnerability rate is. And that is really that gap between what people actually know and what they actually do. And if we want to start walking towards that element of culture, culture is effectively the actions of people. So we're going to try and close that gap in the next 25 minutes or so. Now, the reality is, with the human-related layer, all right, and that's such a buzzword, right? Your people, they are the most important part of your organisation. Is businesses spend loads of money on technology, firewalls, technology, encryption. But the most accessible access point has a desk, they have a name, they are a person, and they are about to make a mistake. And the reality is, you will never reduce human-related risk to zero. You just have to mitigate it and reduce it as much as possible. But on reflection, after 20 years, if you want a culture that moves on and progresses, if you are creating fear, and there's loads of fear in this room, I see loads of marketing about breaches, compliance, risk. All I am seeing is fear-driven. The sector in itself is driving fear constantly. But you're creating that culture where if your end users, your people, are in fear of making a mistake, guess what? You have already lost. So how do we change that? I mentioned earlier, we're teaching people, particularly around phishing, to spot a phishing link. That training doesn't necessarily work. The problem is we are teaching security around test taking. We've built a generation of employees that are just clicking on things to say that they've done them out of fear of being told off. So why does that progress stall? Well, we're really focusing on that compliance rate. 100% completion rate on maybe your e-learning or your phishing exercises or your simulations or anything to do with awareness and training, it is not recognition of engagement. It may be the engagement with your training or your awareness program, but not your engagement of the wider security threat that you're facing from a human risk perspective. And the reality is still there. I see, and I don't want to talk fear-driven, but over 90% of breaches still involve human error, and there is a reason for it. And they're hitting the ceiling really because the focus on information. So we're always talking about tech in the cyber world. But really the friction is, how do people act? What are the actions you'll want people to know about and change? But the reality for most is cybersecurity awareness and training is becoming a chore for people. If you are asking them to tick a box, there's going to be resistance. And I've spoke to loads of people today talking about awareness programs where there's so much friction, people are no longer engaging in them. It isn't about a value. It needs to be lived, breathed, or it loses its power instantly. So, how do we develop and embed a culture of cybersecurity? And the reality is, cybersecurity isn't a single entity. Cybersecurity culture has to be a part of the culture that already exists in your organization, and understanding your own culture will help you build cybersecurity into it. Otherwise, they're going to clash. So there is no technological fix. It doesn't exist. This is about people. People, technology, and processes working together will always be about how to empower your people. But it has to be prioritized every single day via the actions of your people and your organization. So what do? We have to focus on engaging, empowerment to change behaviors, not just make them aware. We need to go from awareness to behaviors, and that effectively will help change culture. So where does it start? The people problem approach that most people have are around terminology and language such as people are the weakest link or the people problem. You're already losing your audience. We have to switch to positive language throughout everything. Things like people are the first line of defense or people are the human sensors. Positive language is going to have an effect on people. And as a parent, I've got 3 kids, and I used to use the naughty step, and then I got told by psychology and behavioural scientists, don't use the naughty step, it's now the timeout zone. It's about self-fulfilling prophecy. The language that we use is incredibly important, and it's the same with cyber. So we have to start thinking about how do we create no-blame culture. The first thing that we did, particularly when I was in government, and it is a risk, okay, you're going to have to manage this sensitively within your organisation and your own boundaries, but you need to start telling your team, if you've made a mistake, there is no penalty. You will not be punished. The faster we know, the faster the organisation can act. Now, I know there's caveats to that, right? People flippantly doing it deliberately, that's fine. But we want to break away from silence. Silence will kill you. We want to celebrate those near misses. Now, often we find out about incidents or near misses within our organisation, and then we hide them from our staff. They are the best leverage that you can use with your staff, because they instantly provide context for your staff and your organisation. So that time there's a near miss, we should be talking about it. We should be learning from it. With health and safety, there's near miss forms, and then all of a sudden we communicate to staff about a safety issue with health and safety, but with cyber, we're just really silent about it. We close the shop. Share stories. Tell them about scams. It lowers the barrier for people to be honest, to talk about those near misses. And really effectively, we want to kind of reduce that dwell time, because that's the enemy, right? Those first 30 minutes of a potential breach or incident, we need a culture of transparency. We need people to start talking instantly so that we can kind of let the IT teams and the techies go in and do their thing to improve things. So, some of the old ways that maybe I had in my early days to what it is now. I talked about fear. We're very fear-driven. But when you're announcing an awareness program or training or anything to do with cyber, saying things like, don't click on this link, or you must do this training because the company will die, and fear and doom and the world's going to end, is not going to help the situation. We want people to really understand why your program or your training or your awareness or your phishing simulations is important to their role. Why are they a target? And what are the actions that they can do to help protect your organisation? And guess what? People really do care primarily about the organisation they work for. That's why they're there, right? You provide them a livelihood. They care about you. Let's not think that they're always going to be the problem. Frequency of training and awareness or content needs to be considered. I think the industry has moved forward massively, but the 45-minute to an hour or 2-hour snooze fest that you're giving people around cyber, guess what? People switch off. They switch off from it because they don't care. They need to understand why it's important. Things like micro modules, small content. Given that content reduces the risk or the barrier for people, the friction for people to actually engage with your program or your training. And then the science behind it is cognitive overload kicks in after 4 minutes. People switch off. So we want to keep them fresh. Give them the content that they require in those bite size. But a big thing for me, and one thing that I like to think that we as a business are starting to do more, is that your content needs to focus on emotional triggers, not just technical. Okay, the curse of knowledge kicks in for most organisations because the people who develop awareness or training programs have the curse of knowledge. They think everybody understands your language, but the reality is that we need to focus on emotional triggers. So with phishing campaigns, it's not necessarily the technical part of a phishing simulation. And maybe, what is the emotional trigger? Is it an authoritative message? Is it a fear of missing out? Is it need or greed? Those psychological variants of all of our training are so important that we often forget about them ahead of all trying to get that technical jargon in. So social proof, I talk about psychology and behavioural science, social proof or herd mentality is incredibly important. So those that are leaders in the room who are trying to implement something from an awareness perspective to the end user, they are only going to care about it if you show that you care about it. So if you're, as a C-suite or a senior manager or a CISO, are not following your own rules, your culture will mirror that. Your awareness will only follow from the top up. And then also, if you have got the issue with things like shadow IT or patterns of people circumnavigating some of your IT solutions, people are not bypassing that willy-nilly. They're actually being quite productive. It's not necessarily malicious. So can we find a way of making security more simple for them? Or look at some of those shadow IT things that people are doing to actually think, well, maybe a solution needs to be found to why people are circumnavigating your security. So what do high-performing cultures actually do, and what do they look like? Amazingly, against better judgment, the best cultures from a security perspective aren't the one necessarily with the highest completion rate or the fewest clicks. They are the ones where your employees feel safe to say, do you know what? I might have clicked something, I care about it, I shouldn't have, and they report it. That shift from necessarily saying, how do we stop hackers? Because guess what? We're not going to stop them, to how do we make the right choices or the easiest choices for people, and how do we report them, is a huge mindset shift that we need to make for our staff. And really, as we implement things like gamification and meaning, don't just give people badges for the sake of it, or well done, you've completed your module, or here's the certificate, but give them agency. Involve your staff into decisions about why things are important. What is important to them as a security perspective? Why do they care about your organisation? And start speaking to your staff about why it matters to them, and let them steer some of the solutions from an awareness and training perspective that you can hear. They are the ears on the ground. They're the ones that are seeing and living and breathing your culture every day, and they're going to be the ones that are living and breathing your cybersecurity culture every day. So effectively, in summary, stop measuring how people know necessarily things like policies. Start measuring about how people care about the outcomes of your training and awareness. Security awareness isn't just a project. It has an end date. It's a social contract, actually, with your organisation and your people. You don't build a secure culture with software. You build it with trust in your people, giving them autonomy and allowing them to speak up and speak to you as an organisation to help protect. Now, importantly, I mentioned about language, and I want to talk about positivity, because I walk around the hall and I hear about how cybersecurity awareness and training and phishing simulations don't work. Guess what? They actually do. Evidence is supporting that those that engage in awareness and training are seeing big shifts in the chance that a breach for their organisation, both on an individual level and an organisational level. As you can see on screen, we are improving. The problem and why breaches are coming up and why you're being marketed with messages about how security isn't working because there's more breaches than ever before is because the attack surface is greater. AI-driven attacks, agentic AI. But invest in your people. Things are working. We've just got to develop, and we've got to change our language, and we've got to encourage engagement of the awareness programs that we are working with, and encourage people and stop driving fear into everybody in our organisation to disengage from awareness and training. And that is the biggest risk to your organisation, not necessarily the hackers that are trying to implement or probe your organisation for an attack. one thing I'd like all of you to do, I've been prepared to stand here with my reputation on the line after 20 years in government, and believe me, it was quite a high position, and tell you and confess to you about the things that I did wrong. So I'd like you to come and visit me at Bob's Business Stand, which is just round the corner there, and take a post-it note and give me a confession about something you've done wrong from a human risk perspective, whether it be about sharing passwords or clicking on a dodgy link. I want to find out and get those messages so that we can share as an organisation some of the things that happen in reality, to talk about them so that we can all learn from them. And if we all as a group and a community learn from them, and this is a great community to be a big part of, so that we can share those messages so that we can all learn. I want to open the floor up as my man comes to the fore for any questions from the audience. And then you can clap me all at the end. I got a smile there, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting presentation. The question I had was, with regards to your point about leading by example.
Yeah.
What do you do when you encounter organizations where the leaders aren't leading by example? You know, the ones that are circumventing the policies and procedures that have been put in place. How do you address that if you come across it?
So it's a great question, and I think good cybersecurity awareness is about marketing. And a lot of the messaging from a cybersecurity awareness perspective should be like marketing messages. So Start With Why, which is a book by Simon Sinek. It's a massive book about marketing. Is if you want to get engagement from leaders, is you need to start with why. So why and what is important to your organisation? Is it the chance of a breach? Is it a case study of somebody that in the same industry that's been breached? Is it framing the fact that organisations from a tender perspective now commercially need third-party suppliers need you to be cybersecurity trained. So it's about framing the message specific to your organisation to get the buy-in from the leaders. And there's a plethora of different things that you can do from that perspective. So framing the exact message as why it's important to senior leaders is really, really important from that perspective. Does that answer that for you exactly? Yeah, good, thank you.
Hiya.
Hi.
Thanks very much. That was really interesting. So I work in a housing association with a lot of guys who are on the tools all day, carpenters, builders, plumbers, whatever it might be. And they use a lot of the technology that's available to them, but they use it begrudgingly, and they're quite a big attack service for us. They are not engaged in learning or engaging with the cyber elements at all. How would you recommend sort of progressing that part of our business to be more cyber aware, more cyber engaged, and really understand what dangers there are out there for them? Because a lot of the generation itself are anti-IT, anti-technology. How would you sort of look at handling that situation? Okay, so there's kind of two things that you need to do with that. First one's more technical, is remove the friction. So usually it's usually those that particularly like things like manufacturing industry is one of the now most breached and attacked surfaces. A lot of it because their workers are in factories, so they don't have access to laptops. So remove the friction of how you can actually train them. So make things applicable to phones or workshops, those sorts of things. That's the technical part. From an understanding perspective, isn't necessarily about framing the risk in a work context. It may be in a personal context. So how do you, and the reality is COVID did that for us, right? So how do we make this message around how they can be more secure in their personal lives? And that will bleed into their work life. So framing it from that perspective is a really interesting way to do it. Leveraging things around kind of social media with children, those sorts of things, messaging from that perspective. So yeah, the blur between home life and work life is closer than ever before with remote working. So it's about messaging. What matters to them? So ask them what matters to them from a IT perspective, and then build your campaign upwards from that perspective. Cool. Come and have a chat with me later. That'd be great. Yeah. Cool. Any more questions?
one question at the back.
Hi Neil, I am in marketing, so I appreciated exactly what you said about marketing and how you position it. Do you feel the world that we're in now with Netflix, doom scrolling, we're on TikTok, I know you guys make completely personalized and you bespoke content and it's gamified. Do you feel that actually the content's going to be shorter? And do you think it's going to be more condensed and it's going to be more like real time? And do you feel that's the evolution of training going forward, and your thought on that?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Kelly. I think the reality is that everybody's time sensitive now. A lot of people don't do their cyber training because actually the biggest blocker for people doing their cyber training is they want to get on with their job, which actually should be championed. That's a great thing, right? So it's about condensing messages down to be very specific and delivering it in short format. Cognitive overload kicks in, so we want to reduce that content down, give them what they want and they need to know as quickly and as punchy as possible. And the only way you're going to do that is to be able to assess your risk. So what we do, particularly with organisations, is we use the CyBOK report, which is about human-related risks that the NCSC put together. We look at all those threats that organisations are facing. We go into organisations, assess their risk to reduce what those risks are, and we effectively triage an organisation and their risks to go, these are the top head-hitting subjects, and then we deliver them in a short format, nice and quickly, so that they're getting the biggest risk delivered, and then over time, you will shift the perspective because those risks will change. Good, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Neil. And another massive round of applause. You stand and take your
Thank you.
applause. Remember to get over to his stand to confess your cyber sins as well, as he's asked you to do. And we'll be back in about 15 minutes with Dan Hinley, who's going to be talking about Know Before and their strategic partnership with Microsoft.